Good afternoon.
Hi.
And who are you?
I am Peter Kaus.
And what do you do? Where have you been? What's your connection?
I am a physicist at UC Riverside, retired now. And I started here in 1962.
Goodness.
That was my connection.
How many people were here then when you first came?
I think about 20 at a time, and maybe 50 in the course of the summer.
And what field of physics have you been in?
I was in the field of particle physics, am in the field of particle physics, and some solid state, and a hobby in biological clocks.
Which is very busy right now, isn't it? It's a lively field today.
It is, yes. More on the physiological end now. I mean, people know much more what is going on in terms of actual chemical cycles, hormonal cycles, and things like that. We were working more on the theory of system analysis, you might say. I mean, how do things happen?
And we'd all love to pretend there were no biological clocks.
There were some that liked to pretend that.
Back then, when you first came, how far out of school were you? Just
How far out of school? Out of graduate school?
well, in other words, were you just beginning in physics when you first came here, or were you well established then?
Oh, I was reasonably established, yes.
And why did you come?
Why? Before, about in 1958, I was in Princeton working on color television at RCA Laboratories, but there was Colin Pittendrigg, who worked on biologic clocks, who was the leading figure in this country until he died in biologic clocks. And I worked with him because I knew a little more about mathematics. And we were able to do good work. And one evening, David Pines, who was also a friend of Pittendrigg, and we had an evening together, and Colin talked about a wonderful place in Gothic where he spent some summers. And I said to myself, that's just what I want. Be in the mountains and have colleagues to work with and just enjoy the summer, the 3 months when I wouldn't be teaching.
Were you at all serious about climbing, or just to be in the mountains? I don't know,
Mountaineering, walking,
Just hiking.
not climbing in the sense where you can get hurt.
Sure can. There's a strange connection, and I'm kind of looking into that, between physics and mountains.
Yes. Well, I've always loved the mountains, but
It was suggested earlier that may be a European connection. Could that possibly be?
that could be, yes, that could be, because even as a youngster in Austria, I did a lot of hiking and mountaineering.
And if you were going to do a thought process, you'd go for a hike.
Oh, I wouldn't put it like that. No, I think the two things are fairly separate. I don't see any direct connection, but maybe a connection of mood.
Now, when you first came, was there any staff at all, or was it all homegrown?
Here,
Yeah, here at the center.
a staff. Well, there was Mike Cohn and George Stranahan trying to get things organized, and Bob Craig at the Institute. We were the Institute. I mean, we were a part of the Institute. We started as the physics division of the Institute of Humanistic Studies. We had no identity in a way of our own.
Were you
All
able to
the-
use some of the Institute's staff, therefore, to do things like finding housing?
Yes. In fact, in 1963, I became what we called then doing the housing, which however meant I was in no position at that time back in Riverside, California, to get houses, but tell whoever was in charge here to we need so many 2-bedrooms, that kind of thing, and then match the physicists to the houses. And Carol Ann Jacobson was the assistant of Bob Craig, and we didn't have an administrative assistant at that time.
And Bob was connected with the Institute?
Bob was head of the Institute. He
Very interesting. Somehow this connection
I don't
hasn't
know
been
exactly
clear.
what the position was called. It was a position that Urick had later, Stevenson.
This is very interesting because I think you're saying that the Institute was very instrumental in making this possible.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Besides just the grounds, it was also far more important than that.
That's right. It was not only their property and permission to do this, they all financial matters, etc., had to be channeled through the Institute because we had no identity really in that sense.
Now, the Institute had high prestige also at that time. Was that helpful?
Yes, I'm sure it was. But I think a good deal of the credit, though, goes to George and Mike. But together with Bob Craig, they were able to put proposals together. And Bob Craig managed to put together.
Quite a
what it
few
took.
years later, there was some difficulties with the Institute. It was a totally
Yes.
different ballgame then.
Let me say first that Bob Craig, at that time, had the notion, the dream, you might say, of having more
Specialized.
specialized, yes, institutes surrounding the Institute of Humanistic Studies as a resource, you might say. I don't know, you might talk to him more about what he had in mind, but
No, and we did.
biology, maybe political science, I'm not sure.
Biological clocks.
Biological clocks, yes, I would have moved over.
You bought a house here
Yes.
way back when, or?
Oh yeah, it's over 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it now.
None of us could. But there's about 20 physicists who have staked out a stake in Aspen, you think?
I'd say that's about right, yes. Yes. Some have apartments, condominiums, and come regularly. Some have, in fact, drifted away but still have the ownership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think the total number is about in the 20s, yeah, 20 category.
Do you think the public lectures have been an important part of the connection between the center and the town?
I think so. I meet people in town quite a bit who talk about it, and you know, like every program like that, it has its ups and downs. Not all lectures are as amenable to the public as others, but I think for one thing, people really appreciate the effort, even if they don't get as much out of it as they had hoped. But many lectures have been just wonderful.
This last winter was particularly good.
Yes, yes.
I recall you became the president of the center.
At one time, yes.
10 years ago, maybe?
In the early 80s, I think, yes.
Oh my goodness, time flies, doesn't it?
Or was it the late 80s?
More than 10 years ago.
I should know these things, but I don't.
But wasn't that during the period when we were trying to gain the territory as our very own?
That is correct, yes, yes.
And tell us how that happened.
That we gained it?
Yeah.
Well, as you know, we had no territory. We had a vaguely assigned area in which we were allowed to operate. What happened is the Institute, for reasons that I don't quite know or understand, sold the area. There were various people involved. One was called Cantrop, and finally
Hadid.
Mm-hmm. And Hadid, of course, had plans to develop, in particular, what we call the ring, or the track. And I think that's when the city got involved, and because it was a specially planned area. So in fact, nobody could do anything without approval. There was no zoning. And first there was a blue ribbon committee set up that had, I think it was Hella, I don't know his first, what is Hella's first name?
Mort? No.
Yes.
Mort Heller.
I think so, yes.
Oh.
And I was on that first, and then Elihu Abrams, when he became president I'm not sure, he may have been president before me or after me, was on the committee. And at that time, you see, every group, the music that was involved, the music, the Institute, wanted certain buildings And we at that time wanted nothing. So we have to, and everybody made a speech. So we say, if we say we want nothing, we are going to get decimated. So we developed the phrase circle of serenity. And that circle of serenity was our desire for a cooperative. And that sort of persisted then. Nothing much came of the Blue Ribbon Committee, but it was at least a blueprint. The principle that the track should be forever serene, not just physics, but the whole thing. In fact,
I remember it well, and I never heard anyone challenge, what the hell is serenity?
That's right, that's
They
right.
just let it be.
Well, I'll tell you, the houses being built over there now is not serenity. So we lost somewhere along the line, but we gained at least that there is a plan now that will
Weren't we
keep things
given
intact.
We were given the land by the Institute.
Yes,
We didn't have to pay, other than lawyers, we didn't have to pay anybody.
I believe so.
Fantastic.
I think there's certain, my memory is not perfect, but I think there were certain conditions with that, with respect to sewer things we had to do for the common
I see what you mean.
properties.
You had to give easements or something for.
No, more than that. I think there were actual construction things we had to contribute to, but we did not pay for the land as such.
Which people were involved in help? That sounded pretty tricky. Who was involved in making that happen?
George.
George, mostly.
The most brilliant act of my presidency was, this was coming to a head just at the end of my presidency, and there was a committee which at that time was essentially me, and I had the brilliant idea to call George and ask him to get involved. And you, and you know the rest.
We spoke to George on camera the other day,
Uh-huh.
and he explained that it was pretty tough. Not easy at all.
Oh, yes, yes,
And
yes.
I think he did a fantastic job.
He did very well, yes.
You couldn't have picked a better man, possibly, to have done it.
It was also necessary to have people involved that are here year-round,
Yes.
because these meetings would come up at odd times and last forever.
We had a good lawyer, too, didn't we?
Nick McGrath.
He's a tough guy.
Yes. There was some grumbling at the time, which was another reason that I called George, and I did not want to get involved in choosing lawyer.
Well, the other team had ferocious lawyers, really, who
You
wanted
bet.
to bury us. They just wanted to, plow us under and
Yes,
forget
yes,
them.
yes. No, but Nick McGrath, I think, did a wonderful job for us. And here
One
we
local
are.
lady wanted to move us to Redstone Castle.
Yeah.
So that was probably the scariest thing during your time as president.
It was
that
both the
something?
scariest and the most hopeful. You see, R.O. Anderson, for years, had promised to give us the land. And I had no leverage, really, to
Force him to.
force him to. These were just statements. But because this was going to be a final plan for the complex, the campus, as it was called, That's when it came to a head.
Wasn't he sort of at war with the town at the same time?
I think so. I'm not a total expert on these matters, but I think the selling of this to various would-be developers came about because he was somewhat peeved at not getting permission to add to Aspen Meadows.
And he moved to Baca.
He moved to Baca, and
So we were caught in that wake.
we were caught in the wake. And the wake was very dangerous. I mean, it could have ended up with 100 houses out there. As it turned out, we have almost everything we wanted out of it, except maybe these 4 lots next.
Do we have serenity?
I think serenity is a relative thing. If you consider that we're in Aspen, in walking distance from downtown, yes, we have serenity. The music has never bothered me.
We were worried, though, that the music might interfere, I recall.
There may be some prima donnas that are worried about that. I enjoy hearing the rehearsals occasionally drift across.
So you've been very much having a stake in the center and in the town. Has your own physics career, do you think, been enhanced by the center?
Oh, yes. For me, it was very important because I had just taken a position in '62, a position in Riverside, California, University of California at Riverside. And in a way, I was isolated. Mm-hmm. It was just a little too far to be daily at Caltech or UCLA or wherever my collaborators were. So one day I was at Caltech. That was actually before I moved in '61. I was still at the USC in Los Angeles and worked with Fred Zachariasen at Caltech. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that he heard that Mike Cohen, whom I knew slightly because we had both been at the, Institute for Numerical Analysis. I was doing my thesis on the first sort of big computer called the SWAC, Standard Western Automatic Computer, I think.
Huh.
Did
it use tubes?
It was a huge thing, all kinds of Williams tubes flashing around, and it could do in a month what I can do in my little notebook in a week now. But it was the only game in town, and I was there. And Mike Cohen had some position, I don't remember what, at the Institute. I think a fellowship of some sort. And so Fred Zachariasen at Caltech mentioned that he had heard from Mike that he's starting this thing, and it sounded just like the Gothic thing. It wasn't quite like it turned out, but it sounded like it. And I said, I have to go there. And Fred said, well, I can't. But I'll write to Cohn to Mike that
so
you were
felt
interested.
It had some prestige in your mind even then. You'd need a little pull or some connections to go, probably. Couldn't just walk in.
Oh, no, there's no way. It has always been, how shall I say, oversubscribed, or had more people wanting to come than we could accommodate.
Fabulous. Going back, I'm a little curious about that period with the big monster computer. Now we know that that computer was primitive. But at the time, did you think the computer was primitive, or weren't you quite pleased to have it at all?
I have never been a computer person. It was a means for me to solve numerically the equations that I couldn't solve analytically. And so it was great as far as I was concerned. I had help programming the thing, on IBM cards.
Ooh.
I had no notion at how primitive it was. And it wasn't primitive in terms of what one could imagine at the time, which meant physical things somehow drifting through the computer, I mean, each step in an equation, you go from step to step, and each step meant a card that had to go in and say, go to the next step.
Wasn't it very hard to do calculus? It did numbers well, but it probably was terrible at calculus.
Well, you had to, there are all kinds of methods that say a derivative is the function at n and a little bit further, and then you take the difference and divide. And of course, if you make it better, you have to take the distance smaller, which means you have to take many more steps. And it wasn't so fast, so I was there all night sometimes getting the answer accurately enough.
And you needed ridiculous precision, unnecessary otherwise, in order to make those steps work.
That's right, that's
Terrible.
right. And, and it had a line, a queue of other people, graduate students wanting to get on. And so it might be 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wasn't the biggest fear that you might trip and spill the cards and get them out of order, and then you were cooked?
That was for a while my biggest fear, but then a much worse fear was actually realized. The cards went in. The way it went is, it went point by point, go to the next point. And you had a stack of points, so that by the time that stack is in, the first ones have come out, and I can just put them on top and keep going. Well, one time I was there, and they didn't come out.
Oh, they're still in the side.
I said, it's about time to put the new pile in. I put it on top, and there was no pile. And I opened the door, and it was just confetti all over this IBM thing.
Well, the center here has always been sort of computer phobic.
Yeah, a little,
Perhaps a good thing.
yes.
Maybe a good thing that it has been.
I think that comes from the idea there's really a place conceived for interaction. And a computer is a very lonely thing, you know. I mean, if you walk by the office where there is somebody on the computer, they are at that moment not interacting. They're interacting with their program at the university or the computer there.
Have you, there must have been many friendships that developed here that were not just professional, but also social.
Yes, many.
More even perhaps than the university, because people are not competing here. Maybe?
I don't think so much. It's not so much that, but the base of similar people, the group is much larger here. I mean, sure, at the university there are other departments, and that in a way is missing here. But on the other hand, there are so many people here that are doing similar things than I'm doing, that social things evolve more easily. Also, there is a sort of similarity in age and circumstances. When we started, there were various people here that had children of roughly the same age. They're all grown up now. Now it's the grandchildren. But
Although there's a new group coming in who don't have children yet, even.
absolutely, and a group that has young children. So there are a little more groups now in terms of generation. There are 3 generations here now, you might say. At that time, there was, if you're talking about the 60s, there was only basically 1 generation.
Is at the center, do those generations separate, or does everybody mingle pretty comfortably?
I must admit there is socially a fair separation now. I go to the picnics and I mingle with the older friends and very often don't know some of the younger ones.
We've heard, I wonder if you feel this, that physics is more competitive now than it used to be.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Great.
You should read some of the things Newton had to say about anybody who dared compete with them.
Good point. Those Englishmen were terrible to each other.
That's right.
Oh.
Boy, they...
That's true. Darwin had his troubles also, never mind.
I think what is true is, I think it is harder to make a real contribution. The field, well, first of all, there are more physicists. So in that sense, you might say it's more competitive. But it's also more difficult this part of the century to add anything